And one more sort of point, just to let you know, Amy, that we're tracking attendance by doing a participation code. So once during your presentation, I may interrupt you to share a participation code.
Okay.
Okay. So our next speaker is Amy Nazaire, and she is from the Northeast region, the Self-Direction Manager for the Department of Developmental Services, or DDS. So I'm going to be bringing up your PowerPoint, Amy,
Okay.
and we can get going.
Okay. And can everyone hear me okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Because my headphones can be a little funky at times, so.
No, you sound very clear.
Okay, good.
Okay. All right, give me a second here.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I gotta get. Okay, see in the slideshow?
All right, yep.
Great.
Okay, so hi everybody. As Rachel said, I'm Amy Nazaire. I work for the Department of Developmental Services in the Northeast Regional Office. I was, for the past 17 years, the Northeast Regional Family Support and Children's Services Director, and then just for the last just a little less than 2 months ago, I switched over to a different role in the region as the Regional Self-Direction Manager, but I've been with DDS for many years and have worked with Rachel in different capacities over the years, so it's great to see all of you. So I'm going to give just a sort of high-level overview of DDS, and I don't know, Rachel, how you guys have been handling questions throughout your presentations, but I know you said you'd monitor the chat, and then probably we can see how it goes. I might, depending on how many questions are coming up in the chat, maybe we can pause a couple of times during the presentation for questions, but we'll kind of just play that by ear.
Sure.
Okay, so you can move on to the next slide. So DDS, the Department of Developmental Services, is the state agency that provides supports to children and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we also provide some supports to adults with autism spectrum disorder, Prader-Willi and Smith-Magenis syndrome, who don't have an intellectual disability. So we serve a variety of different populations. We do the primary service we provide is services and supports for adults. The supports that we provide to kids are much more limited, and I'll get into that as we go through the presentation. But we currently serve, it's probably a little higher now, but approximately 44,000 children and adults in Massachusetts. So we serve lots of folks. Next slide. And so this slide just kind of gives you an overview. I know that you guys primarily work with adults, but I did want to also include the information about kids services as well, because I think it's important to know. So we do, as I just mentioned, we provide supports across the lifespan, and it varies a little bit by age bracket. So for little kids between the ages of 0 and 3, really their primary source of support is early intervention, which is funded by the Department of Public Health. So they really are the primary source of supports for kids with special health care needs and developmental delays before age 3. Although we do find young kids eligible and we do provide some family support, but really we wouldn't be the main source of support for little kids. And the same is also true for 3 to 18-year-olds. In a similar way, those kids that really the school is their primary source of services, and where kids have an entitlement, as I'm sure you guys all know, for special education services. So that is a legal entitlement that kids have. But we do, again, provide family support and some in-home support, which I'll talk about more in a few minutes, that can kind of supplement the school supports. So really for kids between the ages of 3 and 18, their main contact is with their school, their LEA, their local education authority, and potentially the DDS funded family support center, which I will talk about in a moment as well. And then the green square on the far right is just indicating who in the DDS area office, who would be the contact for this, what we call service coordinators, really like a case manager or program navigator, but we happen to call them service coordinators. So each area office has one children's coordinator. So there's only one per area, and their caseloads are in the hundreds. So that's where we partner very closely with our DDS funded family support centers. And again, I'll talk more about that, the family support centers, in a few minutes. Then between the age, no, you got to go back.
Oh.
Between the ages of 18 and 22, again, that's a slightly different relationship that DDS eligible young adults would have with DDS. The school is still the primary contact if the person is still in school, but that's when if kids or young adults have been found adult eligible, and again, I'll get into that in a few minutes, they would switch over to the caseload of the transition coordinator. Again, there's one, sometimes two per area office, who work with young adults between the ages of 18 to 22 to assist them with transitioning into the adult support system and life after leaving school. And then from 22 and up, as I said a few minutes ago, that's really the population that we provide the most robust services to. And so folks who are eligible for DDS, either under the intellectual disability or ID criteria or under the autism criteria, we would be their primary source for services and supports. And those adults who are DDS eligible are assigned to a DDS adult service coordinator. Caseloads are still very high, and probably 60 as opposed to 300 for the kids, but it's a different, the caseloads are relatively smaller, and really DDS is folks' primary source of supports then for the rest of their lives, assuming that, if they're eligible for us, it's a lifelong eligibility. So that's kind of a lifespan look at how DDS supports folks. Now you can move on, Rachel. So I'm gonna, and I know this information, it's always hard to figure out how to sequence this because it is a lot of information. So please don't hesitate to put questions in the chat if you have questions. And I'll try to answer them as we go along. So how to apply to DDS. So the way DDS works is we have 4 regions. There's the Northeast region, which is where I work. There's Metro, which is Metro Boston, Southeast, and then Central West, which geographically is a huge region that's basically from Framingham West. So it's geographically a very large region. So there's 4 regions, and each of our regions has a regional eligibility team. And those are the folks who process the eligibility applications. And that link that I provided there is the link to the DDS eligibility application. There's also information on the website about who the contact people are for each of the 4 regional eligibility teams. And I'm going to get into the specifics of kid and adult eligibility. I don't do that myself, but I'll give you just an overview of that. But it's important to note for transition age young adults that even though adult eligibility doesn't start until the person leaves school or turns 22, we encourage folks to apply as early as 17.5 years old, just so that we can get them in the pipeline if they're going to be eligible, get them assigned to the transition coordinator and start the planning process as early as possible. Next slide. So the criteria for kids is different from the eligibility criteria for adults. It's a little bit broader. So for child applications, the criteria really is the category is developmental disability as opposed to intellectual disability. So it's a little bit broader. And this, I won't go through all of this, but for kids, and this is a little nuance, which it's confusing, but I'll just go through it anyway, that for kids who are 5 years of age or older, they need to have a developmental disability that is manifested before the individual turns 22, is likely to continue indefinitely, results in substantial functional limitations, but it doesn't necessarily have to include an intellectual disability. And for little kids under the age of 5, it's even broader. So it's basically global developmental delay. And as I said, anyone who's, or maybe I didn't say, but anyone who's found eligible as a child under one of these two criteria will have to reattend when they reach 17.5 years of age to see if they will qualify under the adult, which is a more narrow criteria. Hopefully that makes sense. Next slide. So for adults, it is in the criteria, there's 2 different adult eligibility criteria, as I mentioned earlier. So intellectual disability is what the majority of our adults are eligible under. And that is basically requires, basically the criteria is a full scale IQ of approximately 70 or below, as well as functional limitations. And it has to be a condition that manifested in childhood before the age of 18. And then for the last, I think about 8 years, we have added this new eligibility category of autism without intellectual disability. So for that eligibility criteria, what's required is a diagnosis of ASD, autism spectrum disorder, that's diagnosed by a licensed MD or psychologist. It has to align with the DSM-5 categories, and then also must have some limitations in adaptive behavior. So that's fairly new, as I said, and there's a different array of services that folks who are eligible under the what we call autism no ID. There's a slightly different array of services that folks can access under that criteria. So as I said, the eligibility, yeah, no, you can move on, Rachel. Okay. Thank you. So once the eligibility process has been completed by the regional eligibility team, at that point, the person will receive a letter, either the parent or the individual, depending on their age and their guardianship status, will receive a letter that will inform them that they've been found eligible, if they are in fact eligible, and which area office they will be served by, and a contact name. So at that point, that's when the area office takes over. If somebody is found ineligible, they'll receive a letter as well that says they're ineligible, and there's also going to be an insert in the letter that describes the appeal process. So we do have an appeal process. It's, you know, people have an opportunity to get additional information and request a redetermination. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about eligibility before I move on? Either jump in or put it in the chat.
Hi, Rachel. It's Annette. I didn't see anything in the chat. And hi, Amy.
Hi, Annette.
In particular.
Okay. Great.
And I think, Rachel, you can look at 2 of them that's directed to you.
Okay, I'll look at them later. Thanks. Okay.
All right. So I'll keep on going.
Yeah.
All right. So actually, can you go back a second, Rachel?
Yeah.
I didn't really. Yeah. So I didn't really fully go through this slide. So once someone's been found eligible and they're connected with their local area office, what the area office service coordinator, either the children's transition or adult service coordinator, is going to do is going to work with the family to connect them to and the individual with resources, both DDS funded resources as well as other resources that may be funded by other sources such as Mass Health. So really that person is going to be their service navigator, I guess. And there's probably, you know, there's overlap, I think, with what you all do as options counselors. But that's going to be the family's primary contact in the area office. Okay, you can move on now. So, like I said before, there's really, so DDS for children and young adults, the only service we provide is family support, as well as the service coordination. But family support is also available for anyone who, as well as adults who live at home with their family. So really our family support services and programs are, as this graphic kind of indicates, we have a really robust system of family support, or network, I guess I should say, of family support centers across the state that are run by agencies that we fund. And we actually just did an RFR last year and re-awarded 5-year contracts with an option for another 5 years for all of our family support centers across the state. Many of them were re-awarded, had already been family support centers, but we did fund some new programs as well. And at the very end of this presentation, there's a link to the family support directory that's on our website, which has all that information about what cities and towns are covered by which centers and the contact information and all of that. So the family support centers across the state, I don't know how many there are altogether, probably about 40 or 45, maybe 50. Each area office has at least one, and most have more than one. So there's really 3 buckets of, which is why there's that little picture of buckets on this slide, 3 buckets of areas that family support centers help individuals and families with. One is to help families discover resources and provide information and referral and navigate systems, which, as we all know, is incredibly complicated, or can be. Another key role that family support centers play is to help families and individuals connect with each other, which especially, we certainly saw this, and I'm sure you all did as well during the pandemic, that was a critical lifeline for many of our families, just to connect with each other in person, and then during the pandemic virtually. And also the family support centers provide goods and services for day-to-day caregiving and supports. I think we get into that a little bit more in an upcoming slide, but if we don't, I'll kind of circle back to that piece. Okay, next slide. So this is a little repetitive, or a little more detailed of what the previous slide went through, but and I think this is really important for you all to know as options counselors, because this will be, if you are working with any families who have family members with intellectual disabilities or autism, the family support centers are going to be a really great contact and resource for you to know about. So really, this is the core of our family support system, is our network of family support centers. And this is actually a good slide, because it describes what anyone, you don't have to be eligible for DDS, anybody can call and access a family support center for any of the items in that first green square. So information and referral, they all offer a variety of trainings. There's detailed requirements in the RFR document that folks, the providers were just awarded, about the number of trainings that they need to provide, and the different services that they need to provide. They, as I mentioned, they all provide family networking opportunities, support groups. We do have some grandparent support groups, sibling support groups, self-advocates, people with disabilities themselves who are networking with each other. And then they can also help individuals and families to apply for DDS. So those are all services that anybody, regardless of eligibility status, can access from one of our family support centers. And I do see that question in the chat, so I'll answer that in a second. But so then the items in the purple bullet point there on the bottom half of that slide are things that only DDS eligible individuals and their families can access. So that would be service navigation, which would kind of mirror or complement the service coordination that the area office provides, and particularly for kids, we really rely heavily on our centers to help families with more of that service navigation because of the caseloads that I mentioned earlier of, several hundred children on the children's coordinator's caseload. So service navigation is a key part of our family support centers, helping families to navigate all, a range of things: health insurance, special education, elder services. I'm sure that's going to sound familiar to all of you because it's, similar to, I think, what many of you do with your folks. We also provide a range of social and recreational activities, and then flexible fund community connections and resources. We really encourage people to the centers to try to collaborate and integrate with our local communities as much as possible. And then flexible funding is each family support center, or most of them, have a contract of flexible funding contract and can administer stipends or reimbursements to families that are approved by the area office. And that ebbs and flows based on the budget, the state budget, from year to year. We've, over the last few years, had a little bit more access to flexible funding. There was a period of time a number of years ago during the budget crisis, whenever that was, probably 10 years ago now, that all stipends were eliminated. So it's definitely dependent on the state budget. And we're in a pretty good place now as far as that goes. So Cynthia's question is, the Family Service Association a resource that helps with information to navigate systems with disabilities such as learning disability or autism? I think, Cynthia, if I'm understanding your question correctly, yes. So the family support centers, which I think that's
Right.
what you're referring to.
Yeah, so that's it. I know it goes along with DDS. I was just wondering if that specific agency helps with that type of situation. And I don't know, is it just children or is it adults as well? Because I have a consumer who utilized that service in the past and had come to us, to our service agency, to see if they still qualified, if they could reapply. And they do have a learning disability. Autism is still, I believe it's like a high functioning autism.
Okay. So Family Service Association is the name of the agency?
It's, yeah, FSA. FSA.
Okay.
Yeah. It's in Fall River.
Okay. I have to plead ignorance that I'm not sure if that's, I can check. You know what I'm going to
So
do?
should I refer them to DDS instead, is my question?
Yeah. So it sounds like the first thing you want to do is verify their eligibility status. Yes.
Okay.
What I would suggest is, yes, and there's going to be at the end of this presentation
what they qualify for.
Yeah,
eligibility.
And you could also just email me directly, Cynthia, and I can pass your message on to the right person. I'm going to put my email in the chat right now.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. If they are a family support center, then yes, the answer would be yes to your question.
Okay.
And then Jerry has
Thank you,
a question.
Amy.
You're welcome.
I'm unmute.
Okay. Jerry's asking, what kinds of things can families use flexible funds for? And in particular, you're asking about rent. That's a great question. So we have, and this is on our website as well.
Okay, good.
We have a list of what's allowable and disallowable in terms of what families can use their DDS Flex funds for. The way it works is that the area office that contracts with that particular family support center will be the one who allocates the flex funding, and then the family support center would administer it with the family. And we have a planning process that the center would go through with each family, and there's a stipend expenditure plan that's completed. And there is, so rent in particular is something that we can cover rent, but only for short-term emergencies. It can't be something that we pay for on an ongoing basis. During the pandemic, we loosened up some of those rules, and now we've gone back to our usual rules. But it's usually, really for the most part, I think what families use their flex funding for is either to pay for short-term respite. We have very limited out-of-home respite options, but we do many families will identify their own respite provider, and then they could use that funding to reimburse or pay that person for like equipment or classes or memberships or things like that. There's a pretty broad list of things that we can cover. And
Okay,
like I
thank
said,
you.
it's in detail. It's on in our website, and I put a link at the end of the
Thank you.
presentation. You're welcome. Okay, so next slide, please. I'm going to have to speed it up a little bit. I'm already at 1 o'clock. So Autism Support Center. So we also have a number of regional autism support centers that are similar to family support centers, but are specifically focused on the needs of families who have a loved one with autism. And families can use both their family support center and their autism support center. Again, all of the names and the contact information are in the directory that I provided a link to in the last slide. So the autism support centers don't, for the most part, they do not administer stipends, but they do provide information referral, similar to family support centers, trainings, networking. They can also help with eligibility. And again, similar to family support centers, they have some activities and connections that are only available to people who are eligible. But they're a great resource in the Northeast region. It's Northeast ARC is our autism support center. They've been around for many, many years, and most of the autism support centers have a wealth of information about everything related to autism. So that's an important resource as well. Next slide. Okay. I probably should have taken this slide out because this is a very confusing slide, but I'll give it a shot. So family support services for people of any age. So really, let me talk about that first bullet first, the pink red bullet. So we also, in addition to family support centers, we do have some other contracts for some specific in-home supports. This is probably more detail than you really need, but it's just another mechanism for providing some in-home family support, in-home supports to people. And again, the area office, just connecting with the area office, the DDS service coordinator or the family support center, they're going to really help figure out if this is something that is available or would make sense for somebody. Flexible funding we talked about already, and as I said, it's really the family support centers that administer those funds, but it's prioritized and allocated by the area office, the DDS area office. And then the third thing, just to quickly mention, we also have, each region has a contract with an organization called Mass Families, which is a wonderful organization. They've been around for many years, and they provide leadership training for families. So it's just something for you to be aware of. And again, for any of this, the website is right there. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to your to a local area office or family support center. But it's a great resource that's out there for families of DDS eligible kids and adults to really learn some leadership and advocacy skills. So next slide. Okay, I'm gonna go through this one really quickly. I know you all have copies of the slides, and you can look at them at your own schedule. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. But as I mentioned earlier, for children and young adults under the age of 22, they're eligible for DDS under the kids criteria, the children's eligibility criteria, and really the main service we provide to kids is family support. So it's the family support that I just talked about through the family support centers, but we do have some more intensive in-home supports. They're all closed referral. They have to be prioritized and referred by the area office. But just so you know, in case you do, come across in your work, families of DDS eligible kids or potentially DDS eligible kids who need some more intensive supports, we do have these 4 services. So one is called IFS, Intensive Flexible Family Supports. Each area office across the state has a contract with at least one IFS provider. And that's a short-term intensive in-home support program, 6 to 18 months, to really help, not so much direct staffing, but just to help do some assessment, come up with a behavior plan if one is needed, and really focus on specific issues for kids, primarily kids with autism, but other DDS eligible kids as well. So that's a really valuable service that we provide. We also have a similar program, the medically complex program. Again, each region has a regional contract. So there's 4 programs, one for each region for kids and young adults up to age 25. So it goes a little beyond 22 who have complex medical needs. Again, wonderful program. We collaborate closely with DPH for many of these kids and young adults who also have services from DPH. There's the Children's Autism Waiver, which is a program that's run by our central office that provides intensive in-home services for kids between the ages of 3 and 9 with autism. There's a very specific eligibility criteria, and it's a Mass Health funded program. The family must qualify for Mass Health standard. It's a limited number of slots, and there's an open enrollment period every couple of years for that program. And then a similar program to the Children's Autism Waiver, but this one is run by the regions and areas, is the DESE-DDS program, which you may have heard of. It's been around for many years. It's a partnership between DDS and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So it's for kids who would otherwise probably need to go to a residential school. So these can be some pretty involved kids. Again, many of them have autism, not all, but it's it's very person-based, individualized, in-home support program. And we just received a big funding increase a couple of years ago for this program, and we now serve, I think, about maybe 800 or 900 kids statewide. So it's been really successful, and it's a great option for kids and families. Linda's asking, is there a financial qualifier for the DESE-DDS program? No, there is not. The child has to be eligible for DDS, but unlike the Children's Autism Waiver, where you do have to qualify financially for Mass Health standard, the family does, that is not the case for the DESE-DDS program. Any additional questions about this before I move on? Okay. I can't really see anybody, so I'm just relying on the chat and on Rachel.
Yeah, well, we're relying on Annette for this. She's monitoring the chat. I can't see the chat very well either because I've got the full.
You got it,
Okay.
Amy. You got it,
Okay.
Amy. You just answered it. You're good.
All right. Okay.
Okay, so Amy, I'm just going to interrupt for a minute just to share our participation code before we move on.
Okay.
So it is the letter S. S is in support, S is in SNAP. The letter S is the next code.
Okay. Okay, so just briefly transitioning to adult services. So as I mentioned in one of the first slides, for students who are between the ages of 18 and 22 and have gone through the DDS adult eligibility and have been determined that they're going to be adult eligible when they leave school or turn 22. Those kids will work with the transition coordinator, sometimes also called the 688 coordinator, because transition planning is mandated by Chapter 688, which is also a law, kind of like 766. So those folks, 18 to 22-year-olds, are going to work with a transition coordinator. That's when we're really partnering closely with the school and DDS to do planning. And really try to work on a vision for life after high school. So we get more involved as the young adult approaches leaving school, and everyone who's going through this process is going to receive an ITP, an individual transition plan that's going to kind of spark those conversations about what this person's, in this case, this young man that we see, I can't remember his name, but he's a young man that's served by our Central West region who has developed some really individualized activities and programs for himself. So that's important to know about, and we really try to focus on that transition period. It's been challenging with COVID and the staffing crisis, as I'm sure you guys are experiencing in your world as well, that we don't have the same level of programming available as we used to, primarily because of the staffing shortage. Not as much in COVID is kind of changing over time. So, but we really do try to focus on transition. Cynthia's asking, what if a person dropped? That's a great question. So what if somebody dropped out of school, received a GED, but is 21 and needs help transitioning to adult services? So one of the important parts of the transition Chapter 688 process for us is that the school has to make a referral to us prior to the person leaving. So in addition to the eligibility process, which I talked about, the school, if someone is in school, also has to make what we call a 688 referral to us in order for that person to get on the list for that fiscal year, because DDS has been fortunate, very fortunate for many years now to have a line item in the state budget, and there's funding that's allocated for students who are on that list each fiscal year. So if you miss that, it doesn't mean you're not going to get services, but it's a little bit more, it's a little more complicated. So if I'm assuming that you're talking about a specific person, Cynthia. So again, I would say the first question would be to check with DDS, with the region or area, the regional office, to check on this person's eligibility status. And they can also check to see whether he or she or they are on a list for funding. And if they're not, but they are eligible, then the area office will definitely work with the person to see, and the family to see what we can do. So it's a little bit more complicated. The best thing is for students who are in school is if the school can submit that referral, we go through the DDS eligibility, they get on the list for that fiscal year, and then at least there's a better chance of some funding being allocated to that person. So I hope that was kind of a roundabout answer, but Cynthia said thank you, so hopefully I answered that well enough. Okay, next slide. Okay, so now we're finally getting to adult services. So what do adult services look like? You can move on, Rachel. So with adult services, remember how I talked about there's 2 different adult eligibility criteria. And we also, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, but we also have 3 different types of services. We have traditional services, and then we have 2 different types of what we call self-directed services. And these 3 service options can be available to adults who are eligible under both autism and ID. So traditional services, which, up until maybe, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, was really like all we provided, and we still provide lots of traditional services, involve a contract with an agency. So the agency then, like a day and employment program or a residential provider, they provide the services. They hire the staff, train the staff. In the case of residential supports, they run the show. So that's a traditional service model, and that's what the majority of our services are. Next slide. But then, like I said, and more people now are using self-directed services, which provide people with more options. So, and this is what I'm doing now as of 2 months ago. So after doing family support for 17 years, so I'm still learning. But during the pandemic and now with the staffing shortage, it's been nice to have this option of self-directed services for many families. So it's an opportunity for a family and an individual to use. Will have a funding allocation, and they can develop a more individualized plans of activities. And again, this is probably way more detailed than you need, so I'm just going to kind of go through it quickly. But there are two models of self-directed services that DDS offers. One is called Agency with Choice. The other one is called the Participant Directed Program. And if you can move on to the next slide, Rachel, I'll just kind of quickly. Oh, wait, this is not in the right order. Can you go forward one more slide? Can you go back one more? I'm sorry, you guys are probably like, what the heck is going on here? You know what, let me just leave it at that. So there's traditional services, and then there's self-directed services. And these, again, are just ways of people receiving more individualized services. So let's move on. You know what, let me stop for a minute. Is this way too much information? I feel like it is. Or should I keep going? I see one person who's kind of like, yeah, this is too much. Yeah.
I don't know.
I see somebody who's trying to make a comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can unmute if you'd like. And
Oh, that would be a good idea to unmute while I'm talking away. What my role is to direct people to the right resources. And it's good that I am aware of what they are.
Yes.
But most of this I could explain at a high level and then have them work with DDS, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's perfect.
Yes.
As long as I don't have to know every single one of these
Right.
off
Okay.
the top of my head.
Yes, and good. A few people are saying they find it helpful. Okay. And
yeah.
yes, but Jerry, you're absolutely right. So the important thing to know, and I think looking back for the next time that we do this presentation, we should include at the very beginning maybe a map of the regions and areas, so it kind of
Flows.
Flows a little more, because you're absolutely right. The most important thing to do is, number one, if you're working with a particular person, would be to have them give you permission to check with DDS as to their eligibility status, which we can easily do by looking in our database and finding out if the person is connected to a particular area office or service and a particular service coordinator. Once you know that someone's eligible and they're connected with an area, then that area office is, I'm definitely, we're very area-based system, and we're very committed. We're really, I mean, everybody is, right, in this field, but the area offices are great, and the area directors are really, really dedicated to providing the best services for their folks. So you're absolutely right. That's the key thing, is to make that connection with the areas or the family support centers who work hand in hand with the area offices. All this other stuff is good background information.
Thank you.
It sounds like Jerry's putting it into context, and people are interested in some of the details as well. So you can.
So I'll keep going. I mean, we still have another 15 minutes. So but thank you. That was a great question to ask at that point.
Thanks.
So adult service options. So really the primary services we offer to adults, it's much more robust, as I said earlier, than what we offer to kids, because kids really have other primary sources of support, such as either early intervention or the schools. So we really just provide family support. But for adults, once folks leave school, and then for the rest of their lives, if they're DDS eligible, we're their main source of support. So it's and the primary things that we offer for adults are day and employment programs, residential programs, and also family and individual support. So I'm just going to talk about those a little bit more right now. So the different types of day options we have And again, everything's prioritized and decisions are made and allocations and funding, all that's determined by the area offices. So could I repeat that one more time? Repeat what?
The thing you just said with, so it's day-in support services. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm just like, I don't know if I can remember what I just said. So the array of services for adults.
Yeah.
Day in employment.
Day in employment, that's what it was.
And employment, yeah. Residential.
Yep.
Individual support, which is what we call supports to somebody who lives on their own.
Yes.
And family support, which is supports to people who live with their families. So those
So
are really
if they live on their own and they're at risk of being homeless, do they
Yes.
still qualify as being eligible?
If they are,
That's an appropriate question to ask.
That's a great question. So, and is that who's saying that?
That was
that
Cynthia.
Linda? Cynthia.
Nope,
Okay.
Cynthia.
Okay, because I think Linda might have had just put a similar question in the chat. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so if somebody lives on their own and is at risk of being homeless, and you think that they may, you know or think that they might be DDS eligible, again, number one, reach
Just
out
to
to
call DDS.
email or call DDS to verify their eligibility status. And then, yes, if they're eligible, absolutely. They probably are already getting some what we call individual supports. But if
No, he doesn't know anything about any supports or
okay,
agencies. That's why he reached out to our center.
okay. And yeah, so if he is eligible, then connect him with the area office and they
Gotcha.
but if he's not eligible, then immediately the regional eligibility team will initiate an eligibility process.
Thank you so much.
So yes, and that's Linda had a similar question, which is what is the best way to handle an older adult who has never had DDS? Is it appropriate to refer a person who is elderly? Another great question. Absolutely. It can be a little more challenging to do the eligibility for an older person because really the disability is supposed to have manifested itself before the age of 18. So it's challenging to get school records and such. But yes, absolutely. And we process eligibilities for folks of any age. So yes.
Amy, what I often find is I come across an older adult who's maybe between 60 and 70 years old, who's living at home with their senior parent.
Yep.
Who may be in their 90s, and this younger disabled adult has had a developmental disability their whole life, and the family has kept taking care of them, and they've never accessed any services. There's no school paperwork. There's no paperwork that shows they were ever diagnosed with an intellectual disability. And usually the elderly, it's usually the mother, has taken care of them their whole life, and now she's getting frail, and family members are slightly panicked as to what's going to happen to this person.
Yep. And that's, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's just challenging because they don't usually have any paperwork to back up
the
fact that the person's developmentally disabled, although it's clear.
Yes. But Linda, I would definitely connect with the regional eligibility team. And that's not uncommon. We see that I wouldn't say quite a bit, but on a pretty regular basis. So I can't really speak to how the eligibility team handles that because I don't do eligibility myself, but I know that they're not, it wouldn't be just, I'm sorry, there's no records, you're not eligible. They would definitely work with the individual and the family and do the best they could to make the right decision. But yeah, and it's you're absolutely right. I mean, we see that a lot. Yes, psych eval, that's definitely part of it, Paula. That's true.
I guess my question, part of it is what benefit would there be to getting DDS beyond the services that they would get from EOEA type programs, because that person's typically already an elder as well.
That's a really good point. I would say one of the key parts of it, I think the two can work together, but if like you said, if it's an older caregiver and the rest of the family, there really isn't a plan in place for what's going to happen once mom is no longer around. That's where DDS can really potentially be a great partner, because depending on funding and the area director and the budget and all of that, you know, we have placed people in that situation or come up with a plan, or even just, and the family support centers and the service coordinators are experienced with having that conversation with the family, which is not an easy conversation, as you know, to have. So I think it's, I think it's a good supplement. It wouldn't be an either or thing. I agree. And we've done a lot in over the years to try to collaborate more with elder services agencies, because it is like you're crossing two, you know, these are both the parent and the child could be elders or seniors, and eligible for something from both agencies. So, but yes, the short answer is, when in doubt, absolutely reach out to DDS.
Thank you.
And that's a situation we see, like I said, you know, pretty regularly. So, okay, so I'm gonna have to really speed up. You know what? So I'm not even going to go through this whole slide, but just we've talked about the fact that we offer day and employment supports. We work with a variety of programs. We also collaborate with some Mass Health funded programs like day habilitation, adult day health, occasionally the DMH Clubhouse programs. So there's, you know, a variety of different things we provide to support adults during the day. You can move on to the next slide, Rachel. We talked about,
Whoop,
going backwards.
still.
Nope, go.
I lost my place here. Where are we?
Go back.
All right, we didn't do that. We didn't. Okay, we're here.
Yep,
No,
here we are. Nope, go back one.
here.
Yep.
Yeah, here we are. Here
Yeah.
we,
Yes.
sorry about that.
That's okay.
And-
We
and
already
I'll
talked
just
about.
say, you just, Amy, you only have about 8 minutes left. So,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, and we talked about this already, that we provide individual supports for people who live independently in the community, and we have a few different models of residential supports that we can provide. You can move on. So just very quickly, so I've been talking throughout this whole presentation about the fact that we have two different types of adult eligibility. So for people who are eligible who have autism without an intellectual disability, we have a slightly different array of services. And you can actually skip over this. You can move on to the next slide. So for adults with autism without an intellectual disability, a couple things are different. So the transition process for young adults, often those folks will leave school prior to age 22. So we still do the same type of transition process, but it might be accelerated or happen a little earlier. Each area office has one and often several autism service coordinators who specifically work with the population of adults with autism without ID, because it's a very different group of people. Important difference is that we don't provide residential supports for adults with autism without ID. Sometimes there's a rare exception, but for the most part, that's not a service that's available for that group. But we do have a broad array, as the slide says, of day employment and in-home services for adults with autism without ID. Next slide. I think we can skip over this. It's just basically saying what I just said. Oh, we're done. Wow. Okay. So, so here are some important links and contacts. So because I'm no longer directly involved in family support, I put Ellen Killy-Carson's name here. She's our statewide director of family support. So if you have any family support questions, you can certainly reach out to Ellen. You can also you can always reach out to me, and in the family support directory, that link is on the slide. There's also information about who the regional family support directors are in each of the 4 regions, as well as the regional eligibility teams in each region. So that's a really, really important resource. I would highly recommend that you bookmark that link or print out the directory. It's got it's got great information. It's updated fairly frequently. All the family support centers are listed there, and as well as key area office contact people. And then our website, it's actually gotten a lot better over the last few years. There's a wealth of information on the website. It's a little tough to navigate at times, but it does have a lot of information about what we provide. So we've got 4 minutes left. So what questions did I not answer?
I just see something about psych eval, but I wasn't know, was that a question or somebody was making a statement? Paula?
I think Paula was, I think that was in reference to how do you do eligibility for somebody who's older and doesn't have readily accessible school records.
Social evaluation is what they start with.
Yeah.
It looks like you answered everything in the chat.
Okay.
So, as far as
All right, great. So yeah, don't hesitate. Please, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions at all. And yeah, thank you very much.
that was really helpful, Amy. Thank you.
Good. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Composition. So we'll go over SNAP eligibility, household composition, financial eligibility, verifications, how you can talk to folks about maximizing their SNAP benefits, a few changes due to COVID, SNAP certification, the Healthy Incentive Program, the EBT Card to Culture Program, accessing SNAP benefits, the EBT Online Purchases Program, and then a little information about resources in your local area. So there's a lot of different ways that folks can access DTA to do a SNAP application or a cash application, okay? They can apply online at dtaconnect.com. They can do it old school and fax an application to our document processing center. They could also mail an application to the document processing center. Now, when folks hear about document processing centers, they might think, oh, that's going to take forever to reach a worker. Not true. Typically, documents that are faxed or mailed to us, they end up in the system within 24 hours for a worker to pull that down as an action and work and process the case. They could also call the DTA assistance line, and the number's right there, and they can apply over the phone. And that's something new as a result of COVID. The other thing that they can do is they can go to mass.gov/SNAP outreach partners for a list of partners in your local area. And those outreach partners, all of them can do applications over the phone. Many of them also do in-person apps. So you can look up and see which outreach partners are in your catchment area, and you could refer folks to one of them. Now, if somebody you're talking to needs to apply for cash assistance, we have 2 cash assistance programs. The first one is Transitional Aid to Families with Dependent Children, also known as TAFDC. And the second one is Emergency Aid to the Elderly, Disabled, and Children, EAEDC. So applicants can apply by calling their local DTA office, or they can also apply at dtaconnect.com. And our offices have reopened. They could also go to a local office and apply in person. But these are just some of the easier ways they can reach us. Okay, I just want to tell you a little bit about the DTA Connect portal. It's both a free mobile app and a website. And everything on the DTA Connect site is secure and confidential. At any time, a client can complete a SNAP or a cash application. They can check their case status, and they can also find out their SNAP benefit amounts. They can upload and submit documents. They can find out if those documents were processed. They can get alerts for appointments, and they can read and print notices. I do want to point out, though, we always mail important notices. So, if somebody's not able to access DTA Connect, we're still going to send them paper notices. So,
Mary,
yes.
Do you want to pause periodically for questions in the chat, or how would you like
No,
to do
not a
it?
problem. I can see the question now.
Okay.
Offices you can walk in, you don't need an appointment. So good question. Now, when we're determining people's eligibility, we're looking at two things. We're looking at non-financial aspects as well as financial. So on the non-financial side, they need to be a resident of Massachusetts. Now, it doesn't matter if they moved here yesterday and they want to apply today, not a problem. You don't have to establish residency in order to apply for SNAP. You can literally do it the same day you move to the state. We are going to take a look if they're a citizen or a non-citizen, because special rules apply if they are a non-citizen. We want to know if they're elderly or disabled, and I'll talk more about why in future slides. Right now, there are some work requirements in place for TAFDC clients. We do need to know their social security number. We will need to confirm their identity. We will need to know if they're a student, because some special rules apply if they're a student. And then we also wanted to know about their household composition. On the financial side, we're going to look at both earned and unearned income. Earned income is income from wages or self-employment. Unearned income is literally everything else. So when you think of unearned income, think of things like alimony, child support, unemployment, pensions, social security disability. All of those are forms of unearned income, and they are accountable. If somebody just started a new job and maybe they don't even have their first paycheck, they should just let us know what they're reasonably certain of earning. How many hours per week are they expected to work, and what is their pay? SNAP household composition. On the surface, this seems pretty basic. However, there are some nuances. So when we are looking at a SNAP household, we're defining it as somebody who lives alone, or it could be somebody who lives with others and purchases and prepares most of the meals separately from them, or it could be a group of individuals who live together and purchase and prepare meals together. Now let's take the second example. An individual who lives with others and purchases and prepares most meals separately. A good example would be a college student living off campus with roommates. They tell you, well, you know, I'm paying a portion of the rent and we all do our own thing at mealtime. They absolutely do not need to include the roommates on the application. If there's 4 people living in the apartment, you could have 4 separate SNAP applications if they're purchasing and preparing most of the meals separate. Okay, so who can't be separate? Well, spouses living together or partners living together that have children in common. Just because you're not married, if you have a child in common, you do need to be on the same case. Children under 22 living with parents. Many times I would talk to a 21-year-old adult. They would tell me, I'm living with my parent, I have my own child to support, and I have to pay for my own meals. Unfortunately, because they're under the age of 22 and they're living with their parent, they would have to include the parent on their case or be part of their parent's case. Then unrelated children under 18 where an adult supervises or financially supports. So think about that 17-year-old that may be living with a grandparent. Again, they would have to be on the grandparent's case. So who's ineligible? Residents of commercial boarding houses, residents of institutions that provide more than half their meals as part of their regular services, and college students on meal plans that provide more than 2/3 of their meals. So if you're talking to that college student, it's best to ask follow-up questions if they tell you they have a meal plan. Many students have less expensive meal plans that may be only providing 10 meals a week. 10 meals a week does not equal 2/3, okay? So just drill down if you're talking to a college student. I know you tend to work with more elders, but just keep that in mind in case you do, okay? If you are talking to an elder that's living in an assisted living facility, keep in mind, if they provide more than 50% of their meals as part of the regular services, that would make them ineligible, okay? So we're going to...
There is another question in the chat, Mary, that from earlier on. about some people have.
Okay, so that's a good question. I see the question from Irina.
Yes.
So why can't some people upload their documents online when they log in? Here's the thing, Irina. Let's say somebody just submitted their SNAP application. They uploaded it, looks like it went through just fine. And then they're having trouble uploading. What I recommend is wait 24 hours. If that person is brand new to the system, the application has to sort of bubble up in the system before we can match those documents to the application. So if you just send your application and then you try to upload immediately, it may not go through. So wait to the next day and try again. If they absolutely are struggling to get through, there might be something else going on. I recommend just trying to fax it if that's a possibility. Okay. Let me think. I think there is
another one about when persons applies for SNAP, can they apply for Mass Health on the same platform?
So typically there is a box on the Mass Health application that allows you to check and say, yes, I want to apply for SNAP. So what happens then is that information gets sent to DTA, and DTA will follow up with the client to do an application. So that's another way to do it. If they're waiting for unemployment and living with a family member but purchase meals. So what I would recommend, let's see, so they're waiting for unemployment, that nothing's coming in, so they would just put in the application they don't currently have any income. Living with family, they should disclose if they're, paying that family member rent, because sometimes when people are in, doubling up situations, they might be paying rent. So, if they are paying rent, they should disclose that. But yeah, they could definitely still apply. It's just when they're under 22 and living with parents, again, they'd have to be on the parents app. But what if that person is 23? Okay, yeah, they can apply on their own, because they're saying, I'm preparing the meals separately from the rest of the folks in the household. Yeah, that is not a problem. So I recommend do an application. They put down that they don't currently have any income. If they are chipping in with rent, they should definitely disclose what that amount. Yeah, now if they're applying to clarify the next question, when persons apply for SNAP, can they apply for Mass Health on the same platform? No. As I said before, you can, if you have a Mass Health application, you can check a box that says I want to apply for SNAP, but we don't have the same kind of situation with the SNAP application. You're just applying for SNAP. You can't do Mass Health at the same time. It's a good question. Okay.
There's a couple more. I think somebody's looking for a link, I guess, for the SNAP application. I'm not sure, but
that's a good question about if they check the Mass Health application to apply for SNAP, do the documents automatically transfer over? I have not heard that they do. So let me double check that and get back to you. Okay.
Oh, disregard the link. Okay.
Okay. Okay. All right. We'll continue.
All right. So Mary, maybe I better not interrupt you so often for questions, because it looks like there's going to be a lot. So we'll pause periodically. Maybe you'll say.
Yeah, I might cover them in subsequent slides, but do keep in mind, these are good questions. I don't mind if it's related to the slide. Let's handle it in the moment, but if it's something else, maybe we could save it for the end. So here in Massachusetts, we go up to 200% of the federal poverty level when we're determining SNAP income eligibility. So these are the figures. If you're a household of one and you're grossing less than $21.47 a month, you should consider applying. If you're a household of two and you're grossing less than $29.03, you should consider applying. And when we say gross, we mean doesn't matter if your wages, income from wages or Social Security, it's the amount before anything's taken out. Okay. So we're not talking net, we're talking gross. And these figures go up in the beginning of the year, right February 1st. So these figures will increase again February 1st, 2022, but they're good until then. SNAP benefit levels, these just went up effective October 1, 2021. For the first time in many years, the SNAP benefit levels increased because they reevaluated the Thrifty Food Plan. So it's been the most significant increase really since the inception of the program. So if you're a household of one, the maximum benefit you can get is $250 a month. If you're a household of two, it's $459, and so on. So this is a significant change. Prior to this reevaluation of the Thrifty Food Plan, the maximum benefit you could get for a household of one was $204. So we do have some mandatory verifications, but we do try to check for the information in other database sources that we have access to. So for example, identity. Somebody could submit their driver's license, birth certificate, birth record, etc. But we have access to the Registry of Motor Vehicles. We can verify your identity that way. We also have access to the Social Security database, and we could verify your identity that way as well. Proof of mass residency, it could be a rent receipt, mortgage statement, landlord verification form, etc. But again, we could verify it through the Registry of Motor Vehicles. We do need to know people's social, but we don't need the card. So it can be provided right in the application, or it could be provided if somebody's doing the application over the phone, just tell the worker. Earned income, typically we do need to see pay stubs. So if somebody's getting paid every week, we would need 4 pay stubs. If they're getting paid every 2 weeks, we don't only need 2. They need to be recent and they need to be consecutive. Unearned income, again, we have access to the Social Security database, so we don't need a copy of somebody's Social Security statements. We also have access to unemployment, so they don't necessarily have to, a green card would count as non-citizen status, and that would also serve as proof of identity. Or unearned income, so as I was saying, we have access to Social Security and unemployment. You don't have to give us that paperwork. But if somebody is getting a pension, we would need a copy of that statement. Child support, we can usually verify it through the DOR database, but in some instances, they may need to see some paperwork about that. Citizenship can be self-declared. It's usually not questionable. But if somebody is a non-citizen, they should consider giving us a copy of their permanent resident card, employment authorization card, temporary resident card, etc. Okay, we're going to then take that information and we're going to submit it to a federal database just to double check the date of entry. Okay. A lot of times, if those documents have front and backs, it's always good to send both. Send a really nice clear copy of the front as well as a copy of the back. So if somebody's is self-employed, yeah, a recent tax return would be really helpful. However, sometimes people don't have that information. So they could, I've seen really, you know, depending on the person's kind of work, they could give us some, you know, some recent receipts of jobs they completed, or they could self-declare it in a pitch. The Medicare deductible, no, we're going to start with the gross income from Social Security, but you're going to get credit for that Medicare payment as part of your medical expenses. So let's say you're getting $1,200 a month in Social Security, but 148 of that is for Medicare Part B. You're going to get credit for the paying that 148 as part of your medical expenses. Okay. Good question. So what's optional and why does it matter? Optional verifications are actually important because you can use these this information to maximize your SNAP benefits. So for example, shelter expenses, you can self-declare that right in the application. If somebody's paying $900 a month in rent, that's what you'd put in the application, and you don't need to send supporting documentation. The same with somebody paying a mortgage. If their mortgage is $1,200 a month, the follow-up should always be, does that include taxes and insurance? And the person says either yes or no. If it doesn't, let's say the mortgage payment only included their taxes. You should say, well, how much are you paying a month for homeowners insurance? And if they tell you, well, I'm paying another $100, that is the total amount you should put in the SNAP application. Dependent care costs, whether it's child or adult care, that can be self-declared right in the application. Heat and utilities, again, we don't need to know the amounts. Are you paying for heat? Are you paying for air conditioning? Are you only paying for electric? That can be self-declared right in the application. Medical expenses, the only thing you can self-declare in the application is transportation to and from medical appointments. Everything else, we need to see receipts, okay? And then child support payments, we would need to see the court document showing the legal obligation and proof of payment. If somebody's, got a court order to pay child support, but they can't currently pay it, they're not going to get a deduction, okay? So somebody's asking is how much asset is allowed in order to apply for SNAP? That's a good question. There is no asset test as long as you're below 200% of the federal poverty level, okay? Does that make sense? So there is no asset test for SNAP, and they also just got rid of the asset test for TAFTC as well, okay? So what deductions do we look at? The only one I'm going to go into more detail about, because I think this is more relevant to you guys in your audience, is the medical expense. The allowable deductions, everybody that has earned income, that's income from wages and self-employment, gets a 20% earned income deduction, okay? So if you're only getting Social Security, you're not going to get that deduction. Everybody gets the standard deduction because it's based on your household size. So you don't have to do anything to earn that. Child support, if you've got your child in an after-school program and you're dropping off and picking up the child to that program, you would get whatever you're spending on the program as a deduction, as well as your transportation expenses, okay? Your mileage to and from. Dependent care, that was dependent care I was talking about, excuse me. Child support, just as it sounds. It has to be a legal obligation. The excess medical expense we're going to talk about in a minute. The shelter deduction, again, that's rent or a mortgage and the utilities. And then even if somebody's homeless, they would still get a deduction. They're not going to get to claim any shelter deduction or utility deduction, which goes into the shelter deduction, but they would get a standard amount just by virtue of being homeless. So the medical expense deduction, it's only for people aged 60 and up or disabled. So for SNAP, they consider you a senior once you turn 60. So if somebody's spending less than $35 a month out of pocket, they're not going to get any deduction. So you might be talking to somebody, and if you're answering some questions and they tell you, I have really good coverage, and I'm really only spending $20 a month on a few over-the-counter things. They're not going to get the medical deduction for SNAP. But if they're spending between $35.01 and $190 a month, they're going to get this standard amount of $155. If they're spending more than $190, they're going to get the actual amounts. Let's say it's $400 minus $35. Okay. So I used to talk to a lot of seniors, husband and wife, they would be spending for Medicare Part B. They would also have private insurance. They would have prescription copays. They would have over-the-counter meds that they were, spending every month. That would really add up. So they would get that actual amount minus $35. So what can they claim? Yes. Somebody's asking, does insurance premium count as a medical expense? Yes. So that's on this slide right here. So health insurance and hospitalization policy premiums, Medicare premiums, Medicare Part B, C, D, all of them. Medicaid spend down or cost sharing, transportation to and from medical appointments, including going to the pharmacy and picking up your scripts. So it could be mileage for your own car, okay, mileage to and from the sites, or maybe you're paying a friend or a family member to take you there, or it could be the actual cost of the bus, subway ride, shuttle, or taxi. It doesn't matter if the health insurance is not Mass Health. It can be anything. I used to see folks with a lot of health insurance. They'd have Medicare Part B, but then they'd have, you know, Blue Cross Blue Shields. All of that counts. Okay. Many folks were spending a lot of money on insurance. So somebody's asking, I might need a little more explanation. Working for past 60 days, does she need to provide income of last year? When we're looking at people's current income, it's really what's going on right now. So, you know, we really are just going to be doing like a four-week look back. What happened in the past 4 weeks? Okay. We're not interested in last year's tax returns. You know, let's say somebody was doing great last year and then they lost their job and now they're only working part-time. We're just interested in the current wages. So last year's tax return would be irrelevant in that instance. So other things people can claim for medical expense deduction. Yes, VA income benefits are not excluded. So a lot of those veterans benefits are not excluded. However, if it's going directly to a landlord, we would not count it as income if it's going directly to a landlord. But if it's coming to the person, we're going to count that as income. So in terms of other medical expenses, we're going to look at doctor and clinic visit copays. It can be psychotherapy, outpatient care. Don't forget about alternative therapies. Just because it sounds crunchy, you know, acupuncture counts, chiropractors counts, dental care, rehab services, home nursing aides, service animals. In terms of supplies, pretty much everything you can think of. You know, foot care, dentures, hearing aid batteries, etc. All of that is countable. Prescriptions, it's really what is their share? What is their share of the payments? That's what they can claim, the copays. And don't forget about postage and handling costs because more folks are getting medications in the mail. In terms of medical equipment, I didn't really see this a lot, but it can include the purchase and repair of wheelchairs or mobility aids, prosthetics. I used to see a lot of bills for Lifeline. Lifeline's a reoccurring expense, so we would only need one recent bill, okay? And then communication equipment for the hearing or visually impaired. Yeah. Over-the-counter meds, they don't have to be approved by a doctor. We don't need a doctor's note saying, you know, so-and-so is a diabetic and they need this special cream. All we need is a recent receipt, okay? And you should indicate on the receipt how often they're taking it. So let's take the example of a pain reliever. Maybe they're buying a bottle of Advil every single month. They would give us one recent receipt and write on the receipt one per month. But all of these are countable. Vitamins, supplements, dietary aids, antacids, all countable. So one of the things I wanted to recommend, because I'm not really sure how much assistance you guys are going to be helping with the applications. Maybe you're referring them to a local partner. Maybe you're just saying, hey, call DTA and do an application over the phone. If you do,
there's variation, Mary. So some are helping with the actual application and others maybe referring. So there's
it's a combination of all of the above. Okay,
yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. What I want to recommend is that if you guys are not able to do a lot of case maintenance, again, you're talking primarily with seniors, I recommend giving them the senior assistance office phone number. These guys, that's all they do is talk and support senior applicants. The whole reason the office was started a few years ago was to increase the number of senior households receiving the medical expense deduction and increase the number of resource referrals, while at the same time decreasing the churn rate for senior households and decreasing the number of senior households receiving the minimum. Okay, a lot of senior households only get the minimum, sometimes because they're not claiming their medical expenses. So they do a lot of screening on that front. If you're talking to somebody and they're having a problem with their case, I recommend
Okay. Mary had mentioned she was having some connection problems earlier. So I hope she can get back in to join us again. We'll give her a minute here.
I thought I had lost connection because all of a sudden she stopped and I was like, what happened? What happened?
Yeah, no, I think it's her. Yeah.
Okay.
I thought it was my headset that died. I said, oh no. Okay.
All right. So let's see. She wasn't able to get in initially, and then she tried a couple of different things and she was able to get in. So maybe the same thing will happen this time.
No, she's saying so she's on, but she's asking if
Oh,
we
is
can
she
hear
on?
her.
Did she put something in the chat?
Yeah, she just put, Rachel,
Oh,
can
yeah,
you hear
I
me?
see it.
Oh,
Yeah.
there she is.
Okay.
Am I back?
Hey,
We can
yeah,
hear
hi,
you.
Mary.
Oh, good. I didn't
Yeah,
even
I
do
was just
my,
explaining how you had some connection issues. So
yeah.
I'm glad you're able to get back in.
I'm sorry, guys. So how much of the senior assistance office did you hear? Where did I cut out?
Where did she cut out?
I think that you were just trying to do a good overview and a push for us to really utilize this phone number more and more. We need.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, I just recommend if you're encountering folks and they're senior applicants and they have questions about their case, I would recommend giving out the senior assistance office phone number. Now, typically, if they don't get connected immediately with a worker, they should leave a message and then they'll call them back. Okay, but they do a good job of getting back to folks. So I want to point out, so Rachel, just give me another heads up if I cut out, because I heard you guys. So it's not clear to me that I'm cutting out.
Okay, I'll do my best. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate your patience. So we did encounter some changes due to COVID. These are just some of the highlights. Right now, everyone's getting what's known as the emergency allotment. What that means is that if a household is not receiving the maximum benefit for their household size, they're going to get the difference in the benefits. So again, let's think of that household of one. Maximum benefit is $250. If I'm a client and I'm only getting $100 a month, that's what I was approved for. I'm going to get an additional 150, thus bringing me up to that 250 level. Does that make sense? No, I'm seeing sort of, okay. Again, you're approved for a certain amount based on your income and your expenses. So not everybody's approved to receive the maximum benefit for their household size. So if I'm a household of one and I've been approved for $100 a month in SNAP benefits, as a result of the emergency allotment, I'm going to get an additional 150 a month. That would bring me up to the 250 max for my household size. So I'm going to get 100 plus 150, and I'm just going to get it in just a separate installment. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's a good thing. In most circumstances, interviews are waived for both the applications and the research. Now, do let people know if a worker receives their application and they have a question, they're going to make a cold call to the client. They're usually supposed to do 3 in a row. If they do not connect with that client, then they're going to set up a mandatory interview. Okay, so don't tell anybody they're not going to talk to you. Let them know they may call you and answer the phone. Okay, it's better to get it over with the cold call rather than have to set up a formal interview. Okay. We are using a shorter recertification form, and we're accepting telephonic signatures for applications and recertifications for both the SNAP and the cash assistance programs. So if somebody calls up and says, hi, I want to do a SNAP application over the phone, the worker will go through the process to get a telephonic signature. It used to be we'd have to mail it back to them, have them sign it, and then accept it, and we could finish processing the case. That's no longer the case. We can do it all over the phone, okay? And I also want to point out on the interview front, even if somebody had a mandatory interview set up for them, maybe it's next Tuesday at 3 o'clock, and they say, geez, I'm not available Tuesday at 3 o'clock. They can call DTA at any time, obviously during working hours, and do the interview on demand. So just because they get that notice in the mail saying you have a mandatory interview Tuesday at 3 o'clock, doesn't mean they have to, you know, cancel their appointment. They could call DTA Wednesday at 9 and say, hey, I'd like to do my interview now, okay? So SNAP certification, when we talk about certification, we're talking about the designated amount of time a person is certified to be enrolled in the program. And it's typically either 12 months or 36 months. Now, a lot of the folks you're going to be working with, because they're seniors, if the household has unearned income only, think Social Security, pensions, etc., and is elderly or disabled, we put them on a longer certification period, 36 months. So they really don't have to talk to us for 36 months. Now, if something changed in the interim, absolutely they should let us know, especially if it's going to be in their favor. But we don't need to check in with them until the end of that 36-month time frame. If somebody's certified for 12 months, we used to check in with them at the 6-month mark, but right now interim reports have been waived as a result of COVID. So again, we're only checking in with them at the end of the 12-month period. So what we typically do is we send them the recertification paperwork 45 days before it's due, okay? As long as they get it back to us in time, their benefits will continue. If they don't, the case will get closed and they would have to reapply. Now, somebody's asking a question about the emergency allotment. We don't have an end date right now. It's going to be in effect as long as there's both a state and federal state of emergency, okay? So when one of those goes away, the emergency allotment will, but we would need additional guidance from USDA before we just ended the emergency allotment. So just stay tuned, you know, we'll keep you posted when it does end. Okay, so but again, I don't have an end date. So I'm not sure how many of you know about the Healthy Incentives Program, also known as HIP. The way it works is it helps SNAP consumers buy more fruits and veggies for their households. Everybody that's currently enrolled in SNAP is automatically enrolled in HIP. You don't have to do anything. So the way it works is SNAP households will receive $1 for each dollar they spend on eligible fruits and veggies up to a monthly limit. And these are the limits right down here on the flyer. So if you're a household of 2, you can get an additional $40 a month in HIP benefits. If you're a household of 3 to 5, you can get an additional $60 a month. And if you're a household of 6+, you can get an additional $80 a month. So HIP incentives are earned. You have to spend SNAP at either one of 4 points of sale. So a farmer's market, a farm stand, a mobile market, or a CSA, also known as a farm share. Okay, and I'll explain further. So let's take the example of a farmer's market. There's 10 vendors at the farmer's market. You're going to visit the vendor and you're going to make sure that they process HIP, because not every farmer vendor processes HIP, okay? You want to choose the fruits and veggies you want to buy and swipe your EBT card to pay. So in this example, let's say they were buying lettuce and tomatoes and they spent $7.50 on lettuce and tomatoes. They earned $7.50 towards their HIP cap. and their card was debited $7.50, but $7.50 went back on the card automatically. Okay, so they just got that lettuce and tomatoes for free. The receipt's going to show how much you earned towards HIP, and then also what the SNAP purchase was and what your SNAP balance is. So you can see again in this example, their beginning balance was 104.71 and their end balance was 104.71. Okay. So again, the funds are immediately added back to their EBT card. You need to spend SNAP to earn HIP. So again, that $40, $60, or $80 doesn't automatically go on the card. You need to spend your SNAP dollars in order to earn those extra benefits. Okay. So we have a new search engine, dtafinder.com. You can put in your city or town, how far you want to travel. In this case, we said 5 miles. We were looking to get all the vendor information. And you just do a search, and it's going to tell you which local HIP vendors are in your neck of the woods. And it's also going to tell you, when they're open, what their address is, et cetera, et cetera. Now, let's say you don't have time to go through this with your clients, and your client tells you, well, I don't have access to a computer or a smartphone. They could call the Project Bread Food Source hotline and just say to them, hey, what are the local HIP sites in my neck of the woods? And they'll tell them about farmers markets, CSAs, mobile markets, or farm stands in their neck of the woods. Another benefit of receiving SNAP is that you can utilize the EBT card to culture. What this is it's a partnership between the Mass Cultural Council, DTA, and cultural organizations throughout Mass. So what it is the organizations provide regularly available, free or deeply discounted admission or tuition to anyone with an EBT card. And through the end of 2021, they're also including PEBT cards, which were the pandemic EBT cards. If you want a list of participating orgs near you, you would just go to mass.gov card to culture. So in this example, the Commonwealth Shakespeare Company offered discounted tickets to their performances. So it's not just museums, it's also performance spaces like plays and concerts, all kinds of fun stuff. So I really encourage you to talk it up. Right now, more places are opening up. Now, the card works whether you have the photo on it or not. It's valid either way, okay? The main thing to remember about what's an eligible purchase, think just food. So personal hygiene products, cleaning products, pet food, alcohol or tobacco. Unfortunately, those are not eligible items, okay? Let's see. Okay, so that's a really good question. So the question is, if a person used up all their SNAP and forgot to leave some money on the card so they could access HIP, can they call DTA and get some money on the card? Unfortunately, no, it doesn't work that way. One of the things you might want to recommend if you're talking up the HIP program is shop the HIP sites first, okay, to make sure you have money on the card, okay? Now, here's the other thing. Let's say the person waits till the end of the month and they decide to go to the farmer's market. And let's say that they're a household of 1 to 2, so they'd be eligible for an additional $40 in HIP benefits, but they've only got $5 on the card. What can they do? They can make $5 purchases to reach that $40 mark, okay? They're not going to be too popular with the people on the line behind them, but you can spend 5, get 5 back, spend 5, get 5 back until you reach the $40 mark. But no, you can't access HIP unless you have some money on the card, no matter how small. When the program first opened up, people were like literally doing that with like $2 on the card. I don't know how people didn't mutiny on the line behind them, but that's why we recommend, access hit first, just to make sure you have money on the card. So another thing that's new, I want to make sure you guys know about, is people can use their EBT card to make online purchases. And this is also new because of COVID. So they can use their SNAP benefits to buy food at Amazon, Walmart, Stop and Shop, Hannaford, Aldi, and Price Chopper via Instacart. If they shop at Amazon and they spend $35 or more, they can get free home delivery. Now, I do want to point out these other places, if they have delivery fees, that's not going to be covered by their SNAP benefits. So people would have to pay out of pocket for any delivery fees. And if you want more information, go to mass.gov, SNAP Online. The other thing I wanted to make sure, I know, you know, when you guys, time permitting, you're talking to the clients and somebody tells you, you know, I need to apply for SNAP, and you help them. Let's be honest, you know, the SNAP benefit, even if they get, you know, emergency benefits, it's not instantaneous, okay? Still got to get them the card. Case has to be processed. So one of the things you might want to talk to them about is reaching out to a local food bank to see which sites are in your catchment area. So right here in the state of Massachusetts, we have 4 food banks that cover the state, as well as Project Bread can give you information about local resources. The Greater Boston Food Bank, the Food Bank of Western Mass, Worcester County Food Bank, and Merrimack Valley Food Bank. So the difference between a food bank and a food pantry is that most food pantries and meal sites and shelters are member agencies of the food bank in their catchment area. So what does that mean? It means that as member agencies, you're able to source part or all of their food resources at a reduced cost by virtue of being a member of that local food bank. To find out the list of pantries in your catchment area, you'd want to go to the corresponding food bank's website. Now, Project Bread is a really great resource because what it does is, if people don't know, you know, let's say they don't have access to a smartphone or a computer, and they need to know about a local meal site or pantry in their area, Project Bread can help tell them where it is, okay? They can also, they're an outreach partner, and they could also do the application over the phone with the client. So that's a place that you guys could make referrals to. The Greater Boston Food Bank, they work with about over 500 meal sites and pantries. And they also do application assistance, and they also do a lot of advocacy around food insecurity for the folks they serve. The Food Bank of Western Mass, you can go to their website. They cover the 4 counties of Western Mass, Berkshire, Franklin, Hampshire, and Hampden counties. And you can go to that link to find a local pantry or meal site. And they also can do applications over the phone. And they do have staff, they do have a staff member that speaks Spanish. So they have a bilingual coordinator. Worcester County Food Bank, the same. You can go to their website and check out which pantries and meal sites they work with. But they also do a lot of advocacy work to help decrease hunger and increase access to healthy food. Merrimack Valley, they largely cover the Lowell area. It's a nonprofit. They provide nutritious food as well as personal care items to emergency feeding programs serving low-income, homeless, and hungry individuals in the Lowell area. So just to wrap up, there are a lot of benefits to receiving SNAP. Again, you're automatically eligible for the Healthy Incentives Program. Folks can get discounts on utilities. We'll send them information if they're eligible for the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, LIHEAP. We might enroll them in the Heat and Eat program. If they're eligible for the Earned Income Tax Credit, we'll send them information. They could qualify for the free lunch program for their kids. They would have access to SNAP nutrition education classes, the EBT card to culture. And then if they live in a participating town, they would also qualify for the Youth Pass program. So did do some questions as we went. Are there any other additional questions? Okay, so there's a question. So correct, if some families were not eligible for EBT or SNAP, and they were eligible for the pandemic EBT program by virtue of the fact of either their child was receiving free or reduced price school lunch, or they were part of a community eligibility school district, meaning that all the kids in that school district were eligible for free and reduced price school lunch. So those folks did get pandemic EBT benefits. Now, right now, with all the kids back in school, nobody's doing even a hybrid model. Everybody's fully in school. We're not issuing pandemic EBT benefits because the kids are currently receiving the free and reduced price school meals right at school. Should things change, we are waiting for an additional guidance from USDA to, see if we need to issue more pandemic EBT benefits. But right now, we are not. What we're telling folks is if they have the PEBT card, just hold on to it just in case something changes. And just so you know, the PEBT card is white, whereas the regular EBT card is blue. Okay. Does that answer your question, Cynthia? Good question.
There is another question as well about, can you explain the difference between the HEAT and the EAT program?
So the HEAT and EAT program, I can send you some additional written guidance about that, Rachel, that you could distribute. Basically, sure. What that really is it's hard to explain. Let me send you additional information on that. Okay, because it's a little bit complicated, and I don't want to misspeak.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Was this helpful, folks? I can see just a couple of you. See if there's any head nods. It was a quick overview. You can always, reach out to Rachel if we need to organize, additional training. But yeah, I mean, we'll get you the slides if they haven't already been sent to you. Again, a lot of different ways to reach DTA. You can really just talk to your client and see what's the best model for them. Do you think they'd benefit from talking to a local outreach partner because they could spend a little more time with them? Or would it be best for them to do the application over the phone? Okay.
Yeah. I think it was very helpful because I don't think we've had this many questions come in a single presentation up till now.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Yeah.
I'm surprised at the end of the day, folks were so engaged.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Great.
Somebody said this was helpful. Okay, good.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Definitely.
Okay.
Okay, and if if more comes in later, we can always get those to you.
Yeah, you can do that. I'm going to make myself a note, Rachel, to send you information about HEAT needs.
HEAT need, yeah, sounds good.
I think I'm going to take it right from the online guide. Okay.
Okay, that'd be great.
All right.
Yeah.
Somebody said they're losing a connection. I don't know if it's me.
Probably not.
Yeah. I apologize.
Yeah, I don't think it's you.
I see someone had said something about acute care. They asked a question before about acute care, earlier question about acute medical costs. Can I circle back to that, please? I asked a question earlier about acute medical costs.
Oh, yeah, I did see a question about somebody that said there's variable medical costs that, it's not consistent. One week it might be very high, another time not much. I don't know if it's that one.
Yes, that's probably
that was actually my question. I wrote it at 2:05.
Okay.
And the question, I'm just trying to load it for you so you don't have to find it.
Sure.
So what is the question? You're saying that the medical expenses fluctuate?
Yeah, like, so if somebody is in an acute medical crisis and like, say they have extenuating medical bills for that period, but it's not like a
Oh, see, yeah.
long-term.
What they should really do is they should really submit all of their medical expenses. So let's say, unfortunately, that individual had 2 months and it was just a lot of bills. They should submit all of those bills, all the co-pays, prescription, whatever. Submit all of that, and they're going to get, that's going to be part of their medical expense deduction. But then also take a look at the ongoing expenses, the ones that don't really fluctuate. We're going to know that they're paying for Medicare Part B, but if they have a supplemental plan, send in the information about the supplemental plan. Typically, what we recommend when it comes to the prescription costs is do a 1-year look back with the pharmacy and get a printout from the pharmacy. They can always redact what they're taking. We don't need to know that, as long as they keep that column, what they owe, what their expenses, keep that clean. We can give them credit for that. But yeah, they should submit everything, both the ones that are stable and ongoing, as well as the recent high expenses.
Thank you so much. I guess just one more point of clarification on that. Does that mean that the medical expense piece is not like the income piece where you are getting like a 4-week snapshot? You're looking for.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, we would typically, what we do is we do kind of like a 1-year look back. So we want to know, like, what did they incur from like 1 year from when they're applying, go back a year. Don't tell us about something that they spent money on 5 years ago. Just look back 1 year. Yeah.
Thanks so much. That's so helpful.
Yeah. And like, think about the over-the-counter med receipts. Again, submit a recent receipt, with the foot care item, the pain relief, et cetera, the vitamins, and indicate how often you're taking them. And then that would get entered as a reoccurring expense. But some of those, as you were talking about, like the acute expenses, that's just going to get, like, that's not going to show up as part of the equation as a reoccurring expense, but they would still get credit for it. You know what I mean? So the worker would just input all of the expenses, and they would indicate, if it's reoccurring or a one-time expense, and then really Beacon does the calculation.
So Mary, I think you have time just for one last question, which is, can you expand on the utilities benefit?
Okay, so here's the thing. If somebody's paying for either heating or cooling, now you think cooling, you want to think AC. Let's take the example of somebody living in subsidized housing, and they tell you, I'm not responsible for heating, but I have to pay a bump in the summertime to run my AC. They charge me an extra fee in the summertime to run my AC. They should put in the application that they're paying for air conditioning, because they're going to get the highest utility allowance just by virtue of paying for the cooling piece. If they pay for heating, again, they're going to get the highest utility allowance, and that deduction, so to speak, incorporates the rest of them, which is electric and phone. Now, if somebody tells you, I don't pay for heating, I don't pay for cooling, I just pay for electricity, then that's a different deduction, okay? And then let's say you're talking to somebody, again, they could be in subsidized housing, or they could be in like a home sharing situation. I only pay for phone. Then they would get the lowest deduction, which is the phone allowance deduction, okay? But they just have to indicate it. It's very clear in both the paper app or, DTA Connect. What are they paying for? And then that goes into sort of the SNAP formula to determine what their benefit amount is. Does that make sense?
That was Trish that asked that question.
Does that make sense, Trish? Okay, good. Yeah. You just, again, we don't need receipts. Just if you pay for heat, you get the highest utility allowance, heating or cooling. just electric, you would get a different amount, and only phone, you'd get a different amount. And if you're a homeless individual, you don't get the utility allowance or a shelter deduction, you would just get a homeless deduction. Okay.
Thank you so much, Mary.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys.
Really helpful.
Good,
Yeah.
Good questions. I rarely talk to such an engaged group.
End of the day, too. Though not quite the end of the day for them. They've got one little piece.
Somebody, folks got their coffee. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye.
So just to close things off for today, I know you need the participation code, which will be forthcoming in a moment. And I'm going to pull up the poll for you to do and I think I put in 5 minutes for it this time. It won't take you 5 minutes, but we'll do that. And tomorrow, I just want you to take note that we start at 9 tomorrow. So it's a little bit of a longer day. Starts at 9 and ends at, I think it's 3:15 tomorrow. But you'll be getting the same 45-minute lunch and the breaks and so on. So let me see if I can get that poll. Okay. Uh-oh, it's not in there. It's not in where it's supposed to be. All right, let me try one more place. Let's see. Well, all right, I don't know if this is going to work. We'll try this. But I think this is going to be the one that only gives you a minute. That seems to be the only one that's coming up. So go right to this and fill it out as fast as you can if it comes up. Let's see. Okay, can you see it over here? No, cannot. Okay, thanks. Okay, good to share it. Okay, open poll. Okay.
Now it is.
Going now.
Okay. And just use the little arrow bar to scroll down on the right if you don't see all the questions. Oh, actually, it's allowing 5 minutes, so you don't have to. You can take your time to answer the questions. Okay, just gonna allow another minute for couple people to finish up. Okay, well, I'll leave that open for another minute or so. And in the meantime, if you have completed it, I'll give you the final participation code, or even if you haven't completed it. So it's N as in notebook or N as in nectarine. That's the final letter. And so again, that would go to Kate Smith, kate.smith@mass.gov. And if anybody is not on did not receive materials today, so they're probably not on my email list, you need to let me know that to make sure that you're getting the materials. So if that's true, just stay for a moment and let me know that so I can add you to the list. If you're all set, you've done you've got the code, you've done the poll, we'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Have a good night. Melissa and Cynthia, you all set, or do you have any questions?